In the ancient world of first-century Judea, under the shadow of Roman occupation, a teacher named Jesus of Nazareth shared stories that would echo through the ages. One of these, known as the parable of the prodigal son, captures the essence of human longing, rebellion, and redemption. This tale, recorded in the Gospel of Luke around 80 to 90 AD, wasn't just a simple story. It was a profound commentary on family, forgiveness, and divine grace, set against the backdrop of a society bound by strict traditions and economic hardships. Imagine a prosperous household in rural Galilee around 30 AD during the height of Jesus' ministry. The father, a landowner of means, represents the ideal Jewish patriarch, devoted to the Torah's teachings on family and stewardship. His two sons embody contrasting paths in a culture where inheritance and filial duty were governed by Mosaic law. According to Deuteronomy 21:17, the eldest son would receive a double portion of the estate, ensuring family continuity. Yet, the younger son's request for his share prematurely challenged this norm, signaling a break from the communal values that held Jewish society together under Roman rule. The younger son, restless and drawn to the allure of distant lands, perhaps inspired by tales of Hellenistic cities like Antioch or Ephesus, where Greek influences mingled with Roman commerce. In this era, trade routes buzzed with merchants carrying spices, silks, and ideas from the East, tempting young men with promises of wealth and adventure. He gathered his inheritance, likely a third of the family's assets in land, livestock, and silver shekels, and set off, leaving behind the ordered life of ploughing fields and observing Sabbaths. Arriving in a far country amid the economic boom and bust cycles of the Roman Empire, he squandered his fortune in riotous living. Historical records from the time, like those in Pliny the Elder's writings, describe lavish banquets and entertainments in urban centers, where wine flowed freely and courtesans catered to the elite. But extravagance had its price. By the mid-30s AD, famines struck parts of the empire, exacerbated by poor harvests and imperial taxes, as noted in contemporary accounts from historians like Tacitus. Penniless and desperate, the son hired himself out to tend pigs, a job utterly degrading for a Jew, since pigs were deemed unclean under Leviticus 11:7, symbolizing total separation from his heritage. In the depths of his misery, surrounded by the squalor of a pigsty, a moment of epiphany struck. This wasn't just personal ruin. It reflected broader themes in Jewish thought, like the exile and return motifs in prophets such as Jeremiah, who spoke of God's longing for wayward Israel around 600 BC. The son resolved to return, rehearsing words of repentance that echoed the penitential psalms, like Psalm 51 from King David's era in the 10th century BC. His journey home, fraught with shame, mirrored the arduous travels along Roman roads, patrolled by legionaries, where bandits and hardship were common. Meanwhile, the father waited, embodying the patient love described in Hosea 11, a prophetic book from the 8th century BC. Spotting his son from afar, he ran to embrace him, defying cultural norms where elders maintained dignity. This act of compassion drew from Jewish traditions of mercy, yet subverted expectations in a society where honor killings or disownment could occur for such rebellion, as seen in some Dead Sea Scrolls from Qumran, dated to the 2nd century BC. The restoration was swift and symbolic. The best robe signified renewed status, the ring authority as a son, and sandals freedom from servitude, contrasting with the barefoot slaves common in Roman households. A feast followed, with a fatted calf slaughtered, evoking sacrificial rituals from the temple in Jerusalem, rebuilt by Herod the Great around 20 BC. This celebration highlighted themes of joy over repentance as Jesus taught to crowds, including tax collectors and sinners, challenging the Pharisees' rigid legalism. Yet the elder son seethed with resentment, representing those bound by works righteousness in Jewish sects like the Essenes or Pharisees, active from the 2nd century BC onward. His complaint echoed economic realities, years of labor in fields reliant on rudimentary tools like wooden plows and sickles, under the strain of tributes to Rome, which Emperor Tiberius, ruling from 14 to 37 AD, enforced harshly. The father's response underscored grace over merit, a radical idea that would fuel early Christian theology. Politically, this parable spoke to a Judea simmering with unrest, leading to the Jewish-Roman War of 66-73 AD, where themes of lost sons and divided families played out in real revolts. Economically, it illustrated the volatility of an agrarian society dependent on rainfall and trade, where one bad season could devastate fortunes, as evidenced by archaeological finds of coin hoards from the period. Culturally, the story wove in elements of patriarchal authority, where fathers held life and death power, yet here exercised mercy. Influencing later rabbinic teachings in the Talmud, compiled from the 3rd to 5th centuries AD. Technologically, while the era saw innovations like Roman aqueducts and improved milling, the parable's world remained simple, with travel by foot or donkey, emphasizing human choices over material progress. The parable's impact rippled globally. In the early church, figures like Paul, writing in the 50s AD, echoed its grace in epistles like Romans, shaping Christianity's spread across the empire by 313 AD, when Constantine's Edict of Milan granted tolerance. By the Middle Ages, it inspired art, such as illuminated manuscripts from monasteries in the 12th century, and sermons by theologians like Augustine in the 4th century, who saw it as allegory for humanity's fall and redemption. In the Renaissance, Rembrandt's 1669 painting, The Return of the Prodigal Son, captured its emotional depth, influencing European culture amid the Reformation's debates on grace versus works, sparked by Luther in 1517. Politically, it resonated in movements for forgiveness, like post-apartheid reconciliation in South Africa in the 1990s, drawing on its themes. Economically, it warns against prodigality, relevant in eras of financial crises, such as the Great Depression of the 1930s or the 2008 recession. Its legacy endures in literature, from Shakespeare's King Lear in 1606, exploring filial ingratitude, to modern novels like Henry Nouwen's 1992 Spiritual Reflection. In theology, it underpins doctrines of unconditional love, central to Vatican II reforms in the 1960s, promoting mercy in the Catholic Church. As we reflect on this ancient story, it challenges us today. In a world of fractured families, economic inequality, and cultural divides, the prodigal son reminds us that redemption is possible through humility and grace. No journey is too far for return, no mistake beyond forgiveness. It invites us to emulate the Father, to watch, to run, to restore. In doing so, we honor not just a parable from 2,000 years ago, but a timeless truth about the human condition.